Is Russia closing in on their encirclement of Avdiivka? Or is their offensive finally showing signs of slowing? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's December 18th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, let's take a look at the control map. And the biggest changes have taken place here along this Vodiane axis. And I want to point out a couple of fairly minor changes, right? So you note that Vodiane is the southern prong, so to speak, of Russia's efforts to encircle Avdiivka. And we can see that when we zoom in, that Russian forces have advanced along this windbreak and this small creek here to the northwest of Optina. And while this is a town that has remained pretty consistently under Russian control for some time, you can see that Russian forces are probably trying to actually push towards this otherwise pretty low value area, right? Just some forested windbreaks here. But the reason that it may have significance is because it could potentially mutually support the Russian forces fighting here into downtown Avdiivka. You notice they've kind of stalled out in their fight here. And so I think it's possible that they may be trying to occupy some of these positions, because if they can get within, 2 kilometers or so, they could be able to provide some level of support, mortars, or even simply create difficult conditions for Ukrainian forces that may want to maneuver on Russians in this area here. Right? Imagine if you're trying to attack in this easternly direction when you are at risk of being observed or even taking fire from the west. So I suspect that may be Russia's ambition with this type of attack, because again, this isn't, they don't need to capture Optina. There's a huge open space on their way to Avdiivka. And frankly, the Russians have a foothold in the town. So their efforts would be on the surface, better placed in clearing out these forested areas and turning this little salient into something more secure. Because again, right now, you can imagine being these Russian troops, they're facing fire from 3 sides. So I suspect that that's what this attack was, some sort of relief effort to try to draw Ukrainian forces in perhaps even these regions that are currently engaged in this Russian salient, to try to sort of peel them away and force them to reconcile with this attack. But you also see simultaneously two small gains here. This windbreak here near Siverna, you've got Russian forces again advancing. Literally, it looks like about 400 meters. Not hugely significant. It may prove significant if they are able to begin to perhaps encircle Siverna. Once you get into some of these little towns, then you have the potential of cutting off a route. You can see one of the routes into Avdiivka runs through this Siverna, and if Russia can effectively cut this route, then it's going to start a process that they've been trying to do for some time, which is to sever all the connecting routes that allow Ukraine to resupply its troops fighting in the central part of the town, right? And you can see when you zoom in, it's kind of a tall order, right? You've got, at least I'm seeing really, before this you had 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe a 5th route here. So 4 or 5 established routes, plus there may be other informal routes that Ukraine has kind of paved through these empty fields. But the takeaway is that if Russia can cut off Siverna, you're going to see potentially Russia may prove able to further restrict Ukraine's ability to fight in central Avdiivka. You can also see, right, they're just sort of taking some other targets of opportunity, expanding into this small windbreak here, as well as a little bit near this Pervomaisky. Again, I look at these. And here near Bisky of another very low value sort of target. But you can see that in some ways this progress makes sense, right? Trying to support their forces moving into central Avdiivka makes sense. Moving towards Siverna makes sense. But why would you push out near Pervomaisky? What does that achieve in terms of their objectives? Why would you push here, right? You're not on your route to Pervomaisky. You already have taken Pisky. Why? Why drive an attack up this road? What does it serve? And these are the kind of questions that you're sort of stuck every time you look at Russian command. Like, in some ways they make sense. There's clearly a rationale and a strategy. And in some ways they're just sort of attacking to attack. And that may be a strategy in of itself, right? Maybe they want to fix Ukrainian forces in this Pervomaisky area to prevent them from supporting the attack in Optina. But it's unlikely that there's no clear route for Ukrainian forces to go out and around. So it's just difficult to understand why Russia is so injudicious with its troops and resources in launching these attacks. I mean, look over at the combat map here. You can see 54 engagements, right? That's like a 40% decrease from what we've seen on average over the last couple of days. And you can see the concentration overwhelmingly in Avdiivka. You can see here in the north, right? They're really trying to push, not successfully based on this data, but all these other areas that we talked about, we're seeing. Right? Here's, of course, this advance through Optina, likely this attack here. You can see Russian forces trying to move into central Avdiivka, and you can see here's the combat near Vodiana and Pisky. So all of this is here, but the question is, why? Like, what does this serve? Wouldn't these attacks be better off reinforcing these other efforts, or expanding into this sort of corridor that they're trying to cut off? It's hard to understand. It's hard to understand what Russia's larger strategy is. And guys, the holidays are here upon us, and we all need some energy, right, to get those last-minute Christmas presents and to just go on those long drives to get to your family's house. I get it. And for a long time, I was an energy drink guy. I spent $4 on this recently, just to see how much they cost. And yeah, they're more expensive than ever. But you see 41 grams of sugar, right? All that for 114 milligrams of caffeine. It's extremely expensive. It's just a raw deal. That's why I created Strike Gum. 90 milligrams of caffeine, 0 sugar in every piece. And you get 5 in one pack. You're getting 5 pieces of gum, right? So 90 milligrams each, literally an energy drink in each one of these pieces of gum. And this whole thing is $5.99. Best of all, of course, it's a veteran-owned company, right? Owned 100% by me. And the 50% of the profits from this first production run are going to be donated to charities that benefit Ukrainian civilians who've been injured or displaced in the conflict. And if you're a serious energy drink connoisseur or drinker, you may want to check out the tray. This has the equivalent of 75 energy drinks, right? 75 pieces of gum. To buy 75 energy drinks at a gas station is going to run you $300. This is $70, and even less if you use the military discount or the discounts we have now for signing up for our deal newsletter. So definitely check us out, strikegum.com. Now, here's what I thought was even more interesting. Putin is just, God, the lies of Putin just are, he's like the master chef of lies. I don't know what else to tell you, of just nonsense, right? I respect a good spin as much as anybody, right? A good politician is going to be able to spin a loss as a win and reframe things, but Putin's not even that sophisticated, right? He doesn't have to be. And so in a recent speech that was clearly directed at NATO, he was saying, guys, NATO, I don't have a conflict with NATO, which, bear in mind, 2 years ago when he invaded Ukraine, he was like, we are absolutely doing this because we think Ukraine's going to join NATO. It was, by the way, Ukraine never close to joining NATO, guys. And in all his propaganda for 2 straight years, he's been telling the Russian domestic audience that the Russian military is fighting NATO. He says they're in direct conflict with NATO. He actually maintains that there are NATO forces operating in and around Ukraine, usually using evidence of the few dozen foreign volunteers from NATO countries to point to that and say, oh, see, NATO's really secretly we're at war with NATO, right? So, we're not blind. We know Putin's been claiming to be at war with NATO, but he argued in the speech that Russia doesn't have any geopolitical, economic, military, or territorial reason to fight NATO, which is not which is literally something he himself has contradicted. Russia is interested in developing relations with NATO member states. Well, you always have relations. They're just not very friendly, right? And then Putin, of course, followed this reassurance by mentioning that NATO's really aggressively has dragged Finland into the alliance. Guys, I don't know how else to put this. The level of hypocrisy, right? Putin said there will be problems with Finland and that Finland's NATO ascension prompted Russian officials to start forming their own military district, to, a separate military command to face the Scandinavian countries. But here's the takeaway, guys. This is like saying, I have no problem. I have no problem with my neighbors, except for their good-for-nothing brat kid. It's like, then you do have a problem with your neighbors, right? You can't be like, I don't have a problem with... It's like being like, I don't have a problem with Congress, except for those POS elected representatives. It's like, guys, you can't... You do have a problem then. This is... And the fact is that Russia's domestic audience can surely know this, right? And this is almost like one of those things where Putin is making these absolute nonsense statements, both to possibly try to maybe, like, he's got to just be asserting himself and telling the Russian people, listen, I can lie through my teeth and you're going to have to believe it. I can't think of another reason you would just be so two-faced in the same speech, right? It's absolutely absurd, but I've come to expect this from Putin. Very little of what he does makes any sense at all. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you. Thanks to our Colonel tier members at combatvetnews.com. By the way, guys, we just got a new video player. We are working on getting it. So if you've had issues with the video player, one, let me know in the comments. And two, we are working to fix it. So I appreciate your patience. And hopefully we'll have it working here this week. So thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.